Our next guest is chair of the board, the BC Hockey Hall of Fame. They have their huge induction gala Friday at the South Okanagan Event Center in Penticton, and we are pleased to welcome back to the program the former voice of Hockey Night in Canada, the one and only Jim Hughson. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing excellent. It's been a great summer. It's life is good. It's a little different in my world now, but it's very nice.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how's retirement treating you? How much hockey are you watching these days?
I still watch a lot of it. I mean, I love the game. I don't think you do what I did for as many decades as I did without a passion for it, without loving it. So I don't think a day went by this spring where I didn't watch a playoff game. I ate it up, and I just each time I watched, I thought, where would I be today? What hotel would I have to be going to? What time would my flight be? And then felt very comfortable in cracking a beer and sitting back in a chair and watching the game in my home.
I was going to ask you, do you watch it with a broadcaster's eye or ear, or do you totally disassociate and sit down and watch it as a fan these days?
Matt, the biggest difference is I can watch it as a fan now. And the biggest difference is that because I'm not preparing for another game, I watch it really differently. I'm still looking at what's he using on the power play and why has he got that penalty killing unit on and where's so and so because I haven't seen him for 6 minutes. I still find myself gravitating towards that. But the big difference is when it's a really crappy game, I shut it off and move on to something else. And when you're working a game, good or bad, you stick with it because you've got another game coming up, and you got to watch it. But now I don't have to, and I did find myself watching a little more as a fan, because I've never really in our world you don't get to be a fan and have a favorite team. There's lots of favorite teams because I always like the best teams. I liked watching really good teams, and I still feel that way, but never as a fan. And now I found myself really rooting for the Vancouver Canucks when they were in the playoffs because the community around me was so invested, and everybody
Right.
is excited about it. Everybody on the block is excited about it, and I'm still stopped every time I go out for a run or a walk on the beach or I'm out with my dog, and asked to be the analyst because of what I did. So I keep up with it, and everybody thinks it's my fault when they lost and gives me a pat in the back when they win for whatever reason.
We all remarked on the awakening of the fan base because of
Yeah.
the run, and Edmonton had a good scare as well. Getting all the way to the Cup final. Do you remember the extra sizzle when you covered a Canadian team going on a run? And there were a few Canadian runs when you were the voice of Hockey Night in Canada.
Yeah, no greater than 2011, of course. I still have really, really, really great memories of that in some ways. That was really different because I found that as a broadcaster, and everybody knew that I was a Vancouver guy and that I live in the city. Um, Local people didn't think I was a big enough fan,
Uh-huh.
and the other guys thought I was too much of a fan. It's really hard to win that. And same, like with I broadcast the Maple Leafs. One of the downsides of having the top chair in Hockey Night in Canada is basically become a Toronto Maple Leaf broadcaster because you're there every Saturday, whether they're good or bad. And as the years have gone by, I've noticed a real change in fandom. And part of it is social media, I think, but it's just the way everybody in a local fan base expects their broadcasters to be like them. They want fans. And if you're not, you must hate them. And that's the problem you get when you're broadcasting on the national level out of Toronto, is that they want a local broadcast, but at the same time, the broadcasters are broadcasting to every corner of the province. And you might be broadcasting a game where the New York Islanders playing, and the young men who play for the Islanders are from all different parts of Canada as well, and their people are invested in it. So it's really a hard one to win in that sense. And then now you get judged every day on social media or every minute on social media, which has changed the aspect of broadcasting for the guys that are still doing it entirely.
You got out at the right time, old friend. Your timing was exceptional. At the risk of being one of these well-wishers on the seawall, what did you make of the Canucks this year, Jim Hughson? What do you make of the future of this club?
Well, it's the future is better and probably better sooner than I thought it was going to be. It turns out they had some better parts than I thought they had. I think we probably all are in the same boat. And the wonderful thing about hockey is it is the sum of its parts. It's such a team game that you don't have to have the best players, but you don't win unless you have a team and you play together. And that's what I saw. They seem to like it in Vancouver again. They seem to like their coach for a change. They invested in what Rick Tocchet wanted them to do. And they looked in harmony. They looked in harmony as they got into that playoff run. So I found that they had some better parts than I thought, and some guys that are obviously going to stick around. And they have a chance, I think, to be just as good. I liked what they did in the summertime in terms of retooling, in terms of where they spent some of their money. And one of the things that they did that stood out for me in the playoffs was they caught on to what most of the league has now, in that you don't win unless you've got some big stud defensemen with a long reach that can terrify people. And that had sort of gone away from the NHL. It's back, and they were good at it. They surrounded Quinn Hughes with people like that. And then if you watch the draft, you notice that just about every defenseman that was selected, and there were a lot of them, was 6'5", 200 pounds. So the whole league is going back in that direction, and the Canucks were a little ahead of that game. So, yeah, I think, given the fact that Demko's going to be back and he's going to have a more experienced backup now, I'm assuming it's going to be Shilov's. And then I don't see why they can't pick up where they left off and be just as good.
We were talking about Quinn Hughes a week or so ago, asking our listeners if he thinks if they thought he could get to 1,000 points in his career. And this is where we can pivot to the BC Hockey Hall of Fame now, because on the list of players, and he was still listed as an active player because his contract lived, Shea Weber did. You got to see how tough it is for players to get to 1,000 points, because you think about Shea Weber's career and you think about all the goals. And you would have thought, he'd be at more than 589 points, but it just shows you how impossible it is. Only 8 guys have ever done it, got to 1,000 points in their career, but it did defenseman.
Yeah.
It did highlight the goals for Shea Weber as he gets set to enter the BC Hockey Hall of Fame. I mean, just tremendous, the shot. And of course, we remember the size and tenacity as well.
So I'm with you, Blake. I was surprised when I looked at his statistics that he hadn't scored more goals, because he unleashed that bomb early in his career. And, you could fire away. And that's all everybody talked about. Shea was, he's a big hitter and he's got this incredible shot. Yet he didn't become a real prolific goal scorer. It didn't always get through. It got blocked. And that's probably what happened more often than not for Shea, is that guys got in the way of his shot, and he put a few guys in the hospital because of it. But it doesn't take away from the fact that he was right from the get-go, he was a really good player. And this is an interesting message to young people too. He was never drafted in the WHL. He's a kid in Sekeres, and he got listed. The Kelowna Rockets knew he was around, but let him play as a 15-year-old in the Kootenay International Junior League before they brought him into Kelowna. And then he took off. He's 3 years in Kelowna, 3 straight Memorial Cup tournaments, 1 championship at home, and then gets drafted not till the second round by Nashville. And after a little seasoning in the minors, he was there pretty much as a 19-year-old and never looked back. But what a career. And for him to be recognized at the Hall of Fame in Toronto almost immediately upon his career to an end says a lot. He's a great guy and a great player. And it's one of the things I've learned about so many of the players from our province, and that's hockey players in general, I guess, but really humble, solid citizens and really good players. And Shea and Carey Price actually lead a new category for Halls of Fame of players who aren't really retired because
Yes.
they can't. They're still owed money. They're not retiring. But we recognize, and so did the other Hall of Fame, the big Hall of Fame, that Shea's not playing anymore. And he's also not going to retire and give the money back. So he's finished, and he's eminently eligible to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
With his height and
big year for him, and
with his height and weight, he'd be a Vancouver Canuck defenseman, I think, at this point in his career, right?
So might Carey Price with his size as well. Jim, do you get to make the calls to these guys for the BC Hockey Hall of Fame?
I share it around depending on who it is. I had the good fortune to make a number of them, and it is so cool. Like we're a small Hall of Fame. I do think, as a pat on the back to what we've done in Penticton, we now have a wonderful display of over 300 cabinets that identify and salute the players, the builders, and the teams that have come through our province. But it's not the end of the world to be in the. Guys don't wake up as children or go to bed as children dreaming that they want to be in the BC Hockey Hall of Fame. But they do end up there when they're really good. And the one thing that has been really cool for me in the last few years is when I get to make a call to some of these people, that how they're so well decorated. And Carey Price is a perfect example. He's decorated, and we know him as, in his generation, the best goaltender in the world. But he was just very humble and thrilled. And so was Shea, to be brought into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And for people like Scott Bradley, who's in as a builder this year as a great scout, he was almost speechless. And I've run across that. People are genuinely pleased and humbled and grateful to be there. And we have almost, without doubt, 100% attendance by the inductees to our event, which speaks volumes of, well, who doesn't like a weekend in the Okanagan? And
right.
That's part of it too. That's part of the lure.
Yeah, you got some magic there in terms of the location and the venue. And for those who haven't been, and Blake and I go every year at Young Stars, the display there at the South Okanagan Event Center is so classy, so beautiful.
That's why I'm happy about Youngsters being there, and now training camp too, because that means traffic through all the displays and some great visibility for what you guys do there.
Yeah, we're thrilled about that. One of the things that we did during the COVID break, when the building was closed and we still had access to it, and as a group, the board that I'm involved with and the new executive director, who's now not so new, Pat Lawyer, came on board, and it was our goal to just fill the place, because we had like 120 empty cabinets gathering dust that had been installed when the building went in, and it just takes a lot of work to get that done. And now we've added all of the old cases that were in the old Memorial Arena in Penticton, where the original Hall of Fame was. We've moved them all into the SOEC. So we now have displays of over 300 cabinets, and they're all full, and they're all gleaming, and they're all lit, and it looks really good. It's really cool to go in there now, whether there's a hockey game or any number of different events that could be on in the SOEC, and find people just wandering the hallways. And we get calls from people who are in town on holidays wondering when it's open and whether they can just go in and wander around. And they can, because it's free of charge. It's in a public building. It's really in a place where it should be. And now it's been treated properly, and it looks terrific. And it's we also have the event there now, which we couldn't before. But on Friday, for example, when we open the hall at 5 o'clock, it'll be just all high tops, and people can wander around, have a snack, appies, have a cold drink, and just wander around and look at the cabinets for a couple of hours before we move everybody into a section of the SOE itself for the current induction. And that's worked wonderfully, but it couldn't have worked until we got the cabinets in the hall itself to be the star of the show.
Yeah. It's the 2010 Fort St. John Flyers. Scott Bradley, you mentioned Tom Cole from Vernon, Carey Price, Anaheim Lake, and Shea Weber from Sycamores, Friday from 5 to 9:30 p.m. at the South Okanagan Event Center. Jim, if people want to go, can they go? Can they just buy a ticket and go?
Absolutely. You can buy a ticket. You can walk in and buy a ticket at the event. They're also available at the box office at the SOEC through Valley First. You can find them online. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's a fun night, and you get a chance to rub shoulders with all these guys. And most of the inductees are terrific. They'll stand by their cabinet and take photos with people and sign autographs because it's casual Okanagan. It's 35 degrees outside, and it will be this weekend, I'm sure. But it's been terrific to change it over and have. We had to change the event because it used to be a huge banquet, but cost just told us that you can't do that much anymore. And so this works, and it's a great evening with a lot of really good stars. And so I'm really looking forward to this one because, I remember as an aside, one of the questions we always get in this business is, what's your favorite game? What's your favorite team? Favorite game is a bit of an odd one for me, but it was a game in 2013, one of the lockout shortened seasons, and it was in the final, Chicago-Boston. It was a 6-5 Chicago win in overtime, and Brent Seabrook, who was inducted into the Hall of Fame last year, scored the winning goal. So I was telling the story about that, and for whatever reason, it just struck me as one of the finest games I've ever watched because it was 11 goals, it was overtime, it was in the final. And maybe that year, because everybody had so much time off, they had a little energy left by the time they got to the final. But the best team I ever watched play the game was the 2014 Olympic team in Sochi, the Canadian team. And Price and Weber were big parts of that. Yeah. Carey Price had a 970-something save percentage in that tournament against the best players in the world. And Weber was his usual self. But I remember watching that tournament and watching all the Canadian games, and at no time, even though they played in close games and even though they were tied at times and they had to go to, they had to have a little extra time to win some of them, there was never a time I thought that they had any chance of losing a game.
Yeah,
that's how good they were.
Agreed. And it's so crazy too, Jim, because like even the games against Latvia were close in that tournament, and yet you just had so much faith and confidence in Carey and that 977. With context, or 9-7, whatever it is, with context, looks even better with the passage of
now
time.
We've got this silly Four Nations Cup thing coming up, but we are close to best on best tournaments again. Jim, are you excited about that?
Yeah, I love watching best on best, and I love watching the Olympics. You know what, the whole business of the Russian Federation casts a little bit of a pall over it because we all know that when they're part of those tournaments, how good they usually are and how important they are. Although, sometimes they don't do so well as a team when they get that group together. But that said, they're not going to be around, and everybody else will be. The only thing I don't like about the Four Nations tournament is that there's some countries that are really coming that probably in a best on best tournament would be involved and could scare the pants off some of the top teams. But they're not going to be involved. But at least it's a step in the right direction, and we're moving back towards best on best, and we'll get there. And it's about time because we're all looking forward to seeing the new young superstars in the game who haven't played best on best yet. And in Canada, we always expect them to be the best, but maybe we aren't.
Yeah, Blake and I talked about that last week. The USA team looks pretty darn good.
Yep. They're probably going to go. They probably should be favorites.
Yeah, goaltending, forwards. It's a really impressive group.
Yeah, there's a pretty deep group there.
Oh, wow. BC HHOF.com, the BC Hockey Hall of Fame website. Friday, the induction gala in Penticton at the South Okanagan Event Center from 5 p.m. to 9:30. You can get your tickets there, and you can go say hi to our friend, Mr. Hughson, who will be in attendance. Jim, awesome stuff. Thanks for making the time here today. Much appreciated, and best of luck with the event on Friday.
Thanks very much for getting the word out, and really good to talk to you guys again. We'll see you in a rink somewhere.
Be well, Jim.
Mm-hmm. Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.